A doctor in California recently reviewed a patient's blood work. The numbers were remarkable. Arterial inflammation, down. LDL cholesterol, down. Fasting glucose, stable. Immune markers, strong. The patient was 81 years old and had taken no prescription medication in over 2 decades. The doctor asked what he was drinking every day. The man handed him a piece of paper with 10 items on it. The doctor recognized every single one. What stopped him was where the list came from. It was not a nutritionist's protocol. It was not a longevity clinic regimen. Every drink on that list traced directly back to the Bible. That story will not make the news. It does not fit the current model of medicine. But here is what does fit, what fits perfectly, into the most rigorous peer-reviewed science being published right now. One drink on this list contains a compound that major pharmaceutical companies are racing to synthesize into a patentable drug. It has existed freely inside a fruit god named in Deuteronomy for over 3,000 years. Another drink was used to keep a king alive when his infected wound should have killed him. The mechanism that made it work was only confirmed by modern molecular research in the last 30 years. And the drink we are placing at number 1, built from 7 specific ingredients named one by one in a single verse of scripture, has been analyzed by nutritional scientists who found something they are genuinely reluctant to describe as coincidence. Each ingredient provides precisely what the others lack. Together they form a complete system. The kind of complete system that takes teams of researchers years to design deliberately. This one was written down 3,000 years ago. You have been told your whole life that healing lives in a bottle behind a pharmacy counter. What if the most sophisticated healing protocol ever assembled was already sitting in your kitchen, waiting for you to read the right book? Here is what you need to know before we begin. Number 7 on this list was so valuable in the ancient world that wars were fought over its trade routes. Modern oncology departments are now studying it for tumor suppression. Number 4 was consumed every single morning across the Middle East for 4,000 years. Most people watching this have drunk a weakened, enzyme-dead version of it without ever knowing what they lost in the processing. Number 2 will reframe something you thought you understood about one of the most repeated promises in all of Scripture. And number 1. Stay for number 1. 10 biblical drinks. Every claim verified. Every connection to Scripture documented. Every mechanism explained by science that did not exist when the text was written. We are starting now. Drink number 10. Cumin water. The spice that tithed itself. In Matthew chapter 23, Jesus confronts the religious leaders of his time and points out that they carefully weighed out 1/10 of their cumin as a temple offering. Cumin. Individual seeds, counted and tithed. That detail is easy to read past. It should not be. Cumin in the ancient world was not simply flavoring. It was medicine, and one of its most common preparations was as a tea. Seeds steeped in hot water, lightly crushed, consumed before and after meals. Now here is what makes this interesting. You know how some cars have a warning light that comes on when something is wrong with the engine? Think of blood sugar and cholesterol as your body's warning lights. Cumin, it turns out, helps keep those lights from coming on. Clinical trials found that people who consumed cumin regularly saw their fasting blood sugar drop and their bad cholesterol fall. And it does this by waking up the digestive system, triggering the enzymes and bile your body needs to actually process food properly. It is like sending a maintenance crew into your gut every single morning. The priests who weighed their cumin for the temple were also drinking it for their own functioning bodies. The spice was sacred enough for worship and practical enough for daily medicine simultaneously. Steep 1 teaspoon of lightly crushed cumin seeds in 2 cups of hot water for 10 minutes. Strain it. Drink it warm. The people who tithed cumin were doing something right, long before any of us had a word for why. Drink number 9. Hyssop tea. The purification plant that actually purified. Psalm 51, verse 7. King David, at the lowest point of his life, asks to be purged with hyssop. Most readers hear poetry. The people of David's time heard something else entirely. a specific plant, with a specific application, that the entire ancient world recognized as the most powerful cleansing agent available. Hyssop appeared in the Passover ritual, in the purification ceremonies of Leviticus, and at the crucifixion. Every single appearance in Scripture involves purification, healing, or both. That pattern is not accidental. But here is where it gets genuinely strange. The active compound in hyssop, thymol, is still used today. Right now. In the mouthwash sitting in your bathroom cabinet. The same antimicrobial molecule the ancient world applied during their most sacred healing rituals is inside a product you gargle with every morning. The biblical world was not using it symbolically. They were using it because it killed bacteria. At a time when a bacterial infection could kill a king, having a plant that stopped bacterial spread was not a ritual nicety. It was the difference between life and death. Hyssop also contains rosmarinic acid, which fights inflammation the way a fire extinguisher works on a small fire, early, targeted, before it spreads. And its expectorant properties help clear the airways, which is why it was specifically used in respiratory illness throughout the ancient Near East. When David asked to be purged with hyssop, he was not reaching for poetry. He was reaching for the most powerful medicine his world had. Steep 1 tablespoon of dried hyssop leaves and flowers in 2 cups of near-boiling water for 15 minutes. Faintly minty, slightly bitter. Clean lungs. Clear airways. 3,000 years of results. Drink number 8. Fig water. The king's recovery drink. 2 Kings, chapter 20, verse 7. The prophet Isaiah tells a dying King Hezekiah to apply crushed figs to his infected wound. The king recovers. Most people focus on the miracle. But embedded inside this story is a medical detail that stopped scientists cold when they finally examined it closely. Here is what nobody tells you. Figs contain an enzyme called physin. Think of physin like a molecular scissors. When bacteria invade a wound, they build protective structures around themselves, tiny fortresses. Physin cuts through those structures. It breaks the bacteria's defenses open, which is exactly why laboratory research confirmed that fig extract inhibits bacterial growth, including strains resistant to other treatments. Isaiah was not guessing. He was prescribing something that worked at a level we could not see until we had microscopes to look. Drink fig water and the same principle applies internally. Figs carry a specific fiber called pectin that acts like a selective fertilizer for your gut. It feeds the beneficial bacteria while starving the harmful ones. They also deliver potassium, calcium, and magnesium in concentrations that rival most supplements. Soak 4 to 6 dried figs overnight in 2 cups of water. Drink the liquid in the morning. The water turns amber. The minerals have moved into the liquid. Your gut receives them before you have even had breakfast. The prophet healed a king with figs. The mechanism is now understood. Some of the most powerful medicine in human history wore the face of ordinary food. Drink number 7. Frankincense water. The sacred resin dissolved. The wise men carried 3 gifts to the infant Jesus. Most attention goes to the gold. But in the ancient world, this is historically backwards. Frankincense and myrrh were worth more than gold by weight. Entire trade routes existed solely to move them. Wars were fought over the regions that produced them. These were not symbolic gifts. They were the most expensive medicinal substances on the planet. And here is the detail that will stop you. People across the Arabian Peninsula still soak frankincense resin in water overnight and drink it every morning. Not as nostalgia. Not as tradition. As medicine. And now we know why. The active compounds in frankincense, boswellic acids, work like a very precise circuit breaker for inflammation. Your body has a specific switch that, when flipped, produces a flood of inflammatory signals. Boswellic acids block that exact switch. What makes this remarkable is that ibuprofen and pharmaceutical anti-inflammatories work on a completely different switch. Frankincense is hitting a pathway that modern drugs do not even target. Clinical trials published in Phytomedicine showed statistically significant improvements in pain and joint function in osteoarthritis patients using boswellia extract. Not marginal improvements. Statistically significant ones. The wise men were not bringing incense to a baby. They were delivering the ancient world's most sophisticated anti-inflammatory therapy to someone they believed would need it for what was coming. Soak food-grade boswellia resin in a glass of water overnight. Drink it in the morning. The water turns slightly cloudy. That cloudiness is the medicine. That frankincense has been doing all of this for 3,000 years, and major pharmaceutical labs are only now trying to catch up. If that blew your mind, hit subscribe right now. We cover the intersection of ancient wisdom and cutting-edge science every single week. Now, let's keep going. Drink number 6. Pomegranate juice. The temple fruit pressed. The high priest's robe in Exodus chapter 28 was decorated with pomegranates in blue, purple, and scarlet thread. 200 carved pomegranates adorned the pillars of Solomon's temple. No other fruit receives this treatment in all of Scripture. That specificity demands explanation. Here is the explanation science is still working through. Pomegranates contain compounds called elagitannins. When you drink pomegranate juice, your gut bacteria take those elagitannins and convert them into something called urolithin. Think of urolithin A as a cellular cleaning crew. Your cells contain tiny power generators called mitochondria. Over time, some of those generators break down and start producing damage instead of energy. Urolithin A identifies the broken ones and removes them. It is cellular housekeeping at a level that directly affects aging, inflammation, and physical performance. This mechanism is so significant that major biotech companies are now racing to bottle urolithin A as a pharmaceutical supplement. They are spending hundreds of millions of dollars to synthesize something that has been sitting freely inside a pomegranate since the beginning. A clinical study published in Clinical Nutrition followed patients consuming pomegranate juice daily for 1 year. Arterial plaque dropped by 36%. Blood pressure fell significantly. The compound responsible works on the same biological pathway as an entire class of prescription blood pressure medications, except it grows on a tree. The ancient world stitched this fruit into the garments of their holiest priests and carved it into the walls of their most sacred building. They did not know the word urolithin. They knew what happened to the people who ate pomegranates versus the people who did not. And they made sure nobody forgot. Drink number 5. Milk and honey water. The promise described in a cup. A land flowing with milk and honey. Over 20 appearances in the Old Testament. The single most repeated description of God's promise to His people. Most readers have treated it as poetry about abundance. It was not only that. Now, this is the section where people usually glaze over because the science gets technical. Stay with me, because what is happening here is actually extraordinary. Think of your gut like a garden. Raw goat's milk, which is what the ancient world actually drank, carries naturally occurring probiotic cultures that act like beneficial seeds in that garden. The protein in goat's milk breaks down into softer, smaller pieces than cow's milk, meaning your body absorbs it with significantly less effort. It is the difference between digesting a sponge and digesting a cloud. Raw honey is what makes this combination genuinely remarkable. Raw honey, not the processed version, but real, unheated, cloudy honey, is a living food. It contains an enzyme that continuously produces a small, steady amount of hydrogen peroxide. That is an antimicrobial agent. It is literally producing its own disinfectant. The prebiotic compounds in raw honey then fertilize the gut garden that the goat's milk seeded. The two ingredients are not just good individually. They are designed to work together. Warm the milk, not to boiling. Dissolve a tablespoon of raw honey into it. What you are holding is both the promise and the proof. And the clinical evidence confirms exactly this. Warm milk supports sleep and relaxation through its tryptophan content. Your brain converts it into the calm-down chemicals serotonin and melatonin. Raw honey outperformed commercial cough syrups in clinical trials on children. Hospitals use medical-grade honey in wound care because nothing they have synthesized matches its antimicrobial breadth. God chose milk and honey to describe what health felt like. Not wealth. Not pleasure. Encoded into the most repeated promise in the entire Old Testament. If this is landing for you, drop a comment right now and tell us which drink on this list you are trying first. We read every single one. Now let's keep going. Drink number 4. Barley water. The grain drink that sustained nations. When Jesus feeds 5,000 people in the Gospel of John, the loaves are barley, not wheat. The grain of farmers, laborers, soldiers, and ordinary people. The grain specifically named in Deuteronomy chapter 8 as one of the 7 foods God identified for the Promised Land. Barley was everywhere in the biblical world for the same reason the most effective things always are. It worked. But here is what nobody is talking about. Barley contains more of a specific fiber called beta-glucan than any other grain on earth. And beta-glucan does something almost mechanical in your body. Imagine your digestive tract as a long corridor. When you eat sugar or refined carbs, they sprint down that corridor and slam into your bloodstream all at once, which is why blood sugar spikes. Beta-glucan lays down a thick carpet along that corridor. It physically slows everything down. Sugar enters your blood at a steady walk instead of a sprint. Your blood sugar stays level. Your body never has to panic. But it does not stop there. Beta-glucan also acts like a sponge for cholesterol. The liver uses cholesterol to make bile acids. Beta-glucan grabs those bile acids on their way back to be recycled and pulls them out of the body. The liver then has to pull cholesterol from the blood to make more. This mechanism is so well documented and so reproducible that food regulators in the United States, Canada, and the European Union have all formally approved health claims for beta-glucan from barley. Not suggested. Not implied. Formally approved. Simmer whole barley in water. Strain the grain. Drink the liquid. The grain drink that built empires is also the grain drink that cleaned the arteries of the people building them. Drink number 3. Raw honey water. The drink that defined the promise. Honey appears 60 times in the biblical text. Samson finds it. Jonathan tastes it and his eyes are opened. Proverbs calls it healing to the bones. This is not decorative language repeated for effect. This is a culture writing down what they observed, generation after generation, in their most important book, to make absolutely certain nobody ever forgot. But here is the truth most people never hear. The honey you buy at the average grocery store is not honey in any meaningful biological sense. It has been heated to prevent crystallization. That heating destroys every enzyme inside it. It has been filtered to make it look clear and uniform. That filtering removes the pollen and propolis, the very compounds with the strongest antimicrobial activity. What is left in that plastic bottle is essentially flavored sugar water. The label says honey. The biology says otherwise. Real honey, raw, cloudy, crystallizing at room temperature, thick enough to resist a spoon, is a different substance entirely. It contains a live enzyme that produces hydrogen peroxide continuously as long as the honey remains undiluted. It contains prebiotic compounds that selectively feed the beneficial bacteria in your gut. It contains polyphenol with documented antioxidant activity. Clinical research confirmed that raw honey kills drug-resistant bacteria including MRSA, the strain that defeats most antibiotics. A systematic review published in the Archives of Medical Research found consistent evidence across multiple human trials for honey's effects on inflammation, gut health, and wound healing. The ancient world consumed raw honey dissolved in warm water as their morning tonic, their cold remedy, their endurance drink before long travel, and their nightly comfort before sleep. 60 mentions in scripture because 60 observations across centuries of generations confirmed the same thing. It works. It has always worked. All we did was process it into uselessness and sell it back to ourselves in a plastic bear. Drink number 2. Grape juice and raisin water. The vine that ran deeper than wine. The grapevine appears over 500 times in Scripture. Noah plants one immediately after the flood. Jesus calls himself the true vine. The vine was not simply an agricultural staple. It was the organizing image of health, flourishing, and covenant in the biblical world. Most people, when they think about biblical drinks and grapes, jump straight to wine. That conversation is real but incomplete. The vine produced a full spectrum of beverages. Fresh pressed juice, grape syrup reduced over heat, and raisin water, dried grapes soaked overnight in water until the liquid was thick with everything the grape had concentrated into itself. Here is why this matters. When a grape dries into a raisin, the water leaves. But everything else stays. The polyphenol, the potassium, the iron, the natural sugars, all of it gets packed into a smaller and smaller space. When you soak raisins overnight and drink the water, you are essentially unlocking a concentrated version of the grape's entire nutritional library. Think of it like making a very long phone call on a very short line. More information per second than you could ever get from fresh juice alone. The compound most studied in grapes, resveratrol, works like a dimmer switch on aging. Your cells have a gene called SRT1 that, when activated, tells the cell to slow down damage accumulation and extend its functional life. Resveratrol activates that gene. This is the same pathway that certain experimental longevity drugs are trying to target. The grape has been targeting it since Noah planted the first vine. The vine provided a pharmacy from a single plant. 500 appearances in Scripture because 500 generations watched what happened to people who kept drinking from it. Drink number 1. The 7 sacred drink. The beverage named in Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy chapter 8, verse 8. God is speaking to Moses about the land he is preparing, and he does not describe it in general terms. He names 7 specific things: wheat, barley, grapes, figs, pomegranates, olives, and dates. The ancient world read this as agriculture, as a description of a fertile, productive land. Modern nutritional science looked at that same list and found something that made several researchers publicly uncomfortable about the language they had to use to describe it. Because here is what happens when you combine these 7 ingredients into a single drink. Wheat and barley together form a complete protein team. Each one covers the gaps the other leaves in the amino acid profile. They deliver steady, sustained energy without any of the blood sugar crashes that come from refined carbohydrates. The pomegranate brings the cellular cleaning crew, urolithin A precursors clearing out broken mitochondria, reducing arterial plaque, suppressing the same inflammation pathways as prescription ACE inhibitors. The figs add the prebiotic fiber that feeds gut bacteria not reached by the grain fiber. A different population. A broader, more resilient gut microbiome. Dates provide natural sugars that enter the bloodstream slowly, alongside potassium that works directly with the pomegranate's cardiovascular compounds. Grapes bring resveratrol and anthocyanins, the longevity switch and the anti-inflammatory shield. And then there is the olive oil. This is the piece most people would miss. All of those compounds from the pomegranate, the grapes, the figs, many of them are fat-soluble, which means they cannot cross from your digestive tract into your bloodstream without fat present. Without the olive oil, your body absorbs a fraction of what this drink has to offer. The olive oil is not flavoring. It is the delivery system. It is the key that unlocks every other ingredient. When researchers analyze cancer prevention, cardiovascular health, gut microbiome diversity, and cognitive longevity independently, using different methodologies, in different decades, with different funding, they keep landing on the same ingredients. Pomegranate. They all arrive, from completely different directions, at Deuteronomy 8, verse 8. 3,000 years before the first controlled clinical trial. Precisely. One by one. If you made it this far, share this video with one person who needs to hear it right now. Hit like, hit subscribe, because we are just getting started on what Scripture and science have been hiding in plain sight. The next video goes even deeper. 10 drinks. All of them rooted in a text that predates our laboratories by millennia. All of them validated by the science that was supposed to make ancient wisdom obsolete. They were not guessing. They were watching. Carefully. Across enough generations that the truth became impossible to ignore. The pharmacy was never closed. It was only forgotten. Nothing in this video replaces medical advice. Speak with your physician before adding any concentrated preparation to your routine, particularly if you take prescription medications. These are foods, not therapies. They work best as consistent, daily practice alongside professional care. The knowledge is in your hands.